Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross, licensed agent with Second City Real Estate. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley, co-founder of GC Realty. Mark, we're doing this a little different, bigger pocket style. We're doing the interview first and coming back and doing the intro. It feels a little different.
Yeah, Tarantino style too.
There you go.
Well, today's episode is totally different, and it's probably spurs why we're doing this different. Our guest today is someone like we've never had. We never really had a true politicians. It's kind of a four-letter word. We never really truly had someone that's running the state, and I think it's very important. Now, Tom and I are not, we're not up here saying vote Republican, Democrat. We're not even talking about that. But reason we had today's guest on is we feel it is super important to have our audience, you guys out there, listen and hear words right from the mouth of the people that are making decisions for our state, which ultimately fall onto Chicago and the suburbs. Probably a majority, because the amount of people that live in the Chicago market is over half of the entire state. And then also, you guys are all putting your money here, and these are the people that are making decisions for us in the upcoming years, and that's going to affect crime. It's going to affect taxes, all that stuff. So, just super excited to have today's guest on to hear what the outlook looks like for him if he ends up winning this campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no matter what you want to say or what side you're on, at the end of the day, crime, new business, redevelopment, that all has a huge effect on what your building is worth, right? It would be a disservice to say that government, local economy, and real estate, they're all absolutely interlinked, and to pretend otherwise is just nonsense, right? So regardless of what side you're on, we need to know these things, right? And personally, Mark, I'm also just sick of people just crapping on Chicago, right? We have so many good things going on. We have our problems. We have so many problems we got to take care of, and this is the outlook. We don't like it. Make a change.
Yeah, no, definitely. We all have, we're democratic democracy in this country, and we can all vote. And a lot of people don't take advantage of that, and especially I think our younger generation. So, yeah.
So let's jump in. Enough of us bantering here. So today's guest, first off, a huge thank you to Gary Davidson. Gary, previous guest on the episode. Mark, you can look up the episode number because I forgot to. But today's guest, the current mayor of Aurora, Republican gubernatorial, I think I said that correctly, gubernatorial candidate running to take back Illinois from the out of control crime, corruption, and taxes under the current leadership. He was enlisted in the Army to serve the greatest country in the world, came back and put himself through school with the GI Bill, went on to become a tough on crime prosecutor, putting criminals behind bars, and then served the city of Aurora first as an alderman and now as its mayor. He pulled himself up by his bootstraps to live the American dream, is committed to fighting a better opportunity for everyone across Illinois as governor. He's a proven leader with a record of reducing crime in Aurora, providing families with tax relief, and igniting economic development at the local level. And he's ready to do the same for our great state of Illinois. Richard, that is one hell of an introduction. You have accomplished a lot. I mean, before we jump in here, because we have a ton of questions to ask, everything we just talked about in your career here, what are you most proud of? What's the one thing that you'd love to highlight?
There's so many things that I could talk about in the way of economic development and progress in the city that I'd like to talk about. But I think our crowning achievement here in the city of Aurora is a project called the former Copley Hospital. So let me just give you a little background on it. So this former hospital, Copley Hospital, moved out about 25 years ago, quarter of a century, and it moved to a new location, built a new hospital. And it was inside of a neighborhood, the old hospital, now referred to as Bloomhaven. But this was a 300,000 square feet albatross in the middle of a neighborhood, the oldest hospital in the city of Aurora. This is our original hospital, just falling apart and dilapidated, asbestos everywhere. And no mayor, two to three mayors before me, no mayor had any idea what to do with this property. And we brought in some developers and investors that turned this property around. Now it's called Bloomhaven. And now it's a huge 300,000 square foot success story for housing for senior citizens, housing for adults with disabilities. It's finally providing medical services in that area when this was a desert for medical services for over a quarter of a century, for 25 years. Our school district moves its headquarters out to this 300,000 square feet property. And now this property that was a drain on our whole city and our whole community on the east side of Aurora, that we were getting about maybe $1,000 a year off of real estate property taxes. Now we're getting $1 million a year, providing over 250 full-time jobs, and it just improved the whole neighborhood. So now this neighborhood with the houses declining and the neighbors sad about the fact they had this building crumbling in their right next door to them are all now rebuilding their houses, refurbishing their homes. It created a radius of 2 mile effect of just progress. And we did this within 4 years, when this property sat there for a quarter of a century, falling apart with no one having any idea what to do with it.
That's awesome. And for our listeners who are unaware, we've covered the Aurora revitalization several times, most notably episode 30. Go back and listen to it. It's a great episode, just to highlight some of the things that Richard's mentioning here. So we've obviously had a lot of success with revitalization in Aurora in your time playing there. What do you think, just statewide, what do you think we have to do to start retaining and creating more housing that is affordable, right? Because there's one thing about creating jobs, but there's also the fact that, rents are continuing to increase at a higher level than income. What can we do to create more affordable housing across the entire state? Well,
all right. So right now in the state of Illinois, we have the highest property taxes, some of the highest property taxes in the nation under, our current governor, J.B. Pritzker, and the Democrats. They're doing nothing to it, And matter of fact, David Pritzker tried to impose the largest tax hike in the history of our state on every resident in our state. Now, he lost that fight, but guess what? Now he's saying that our income is much higher because of this one-time influx of cash, this bailout from COVID-19 from the federal government, and he's raising our expenses. So when that money goes away, and it will, our expenses are going to be at a high level, our revenues at a low, he's going to try to raise tax again. Of course, we know in any community, when you're trying to bring residences in, you got to provide a number of things to them. You got to provide safety, which crime is spinning out of control in the state. You've got to provide growth, which is stunted here in this state. So let me tell you what we did in Aurora and what we can do exact same thing for every municipality throughout the state, which is pretty much the whole state. And all state is just a bunch of cities, just like Aurora. You have to immediately come in and you have to reduce duplication of services. We did that in Aurora. We closed down this old election commission and some other things that duplicated services, that other agents provided, saved us $1 million. We went through every single department and we did a decrement. We cut their budget 5 to 10%. And we did more with less because it was just over bloated from years past. And also the most important thing, we had to change the image and perception of our city. Same thing we have to do with our state. And because we're changing image and perception, we're able to draw in development. So the more businesses you have moving in, the more residents you have moving in, the more you can reduce property taxes. Now, we've reduced property taxes in the city of Aurora every single year I've been mayor. And when we reduce it and create that big property tax base, expand the base, it takes the burden off the few and puts it on the many. So we're able to reduce property taxes. That's the same thing we got to do with affordable housing. So here in the city of Aurora, we have a number of old buildings that sat empty and dilapidated for generations, one up to 70 years. 70 years, no lights have been turned on in this building. It's called the Terminal Building. We put high-end market rate apartments in this building. Now we high-end market rate, and we created interest and excitement around that property. Now we realize the folks we've attracted restaurants, entertainment. So we realize the folks that are working at the restaurants that provide in hospitality entertainment may not be able to afford the high market rate apartment, but we want these folks to live in Aurora as well. So we knew we had to create affordable housing, what we call workforce housing. So we did that. So we said, not only are we going to provide market rate housing, for folks that are catching the train in and out of Chicago and folks that can afford, the $2,000 to $3,000 a month in rent, we also need that market rate apartment that's $900, to $1,200, dollars a month. So we created an affordable housing, a workforce housing program in our downtown as well. And we have what we call artisan lofts, which are lofts that we specifically market to those folks that are in the arts, whether it be music, whether it be painting, whether it be visual or art, whatever it is. So we can bring those folks downtown, start painting our town fantastic. We got to do that same thing for the state of Illinois. We got to go throughout. Listen, we're the 6th largest state in the union. We're the land of Lincoln. We got to start acting like it. We got to look around this country and find businesses that are a fit in Illinois and put them in the areas that need them most. We got to look around this world and find businesses, around the entire world, and put businesses in the areas that need them most, while we're reducing property taxes and making this a state that people want to come and be a part of and not leave, in droves like they're doing now under JB Pritzker.
Go ahead, Mark.
What comes first, though? When in that plan, it's an awesome plan. It's exciting. I'm all revved up over here. Like, what comes first, though? Is it the businesses? Is it the high-end housing? Is it the affordable rate rentals? Like,
and that's always the question: the chicken and egg. What comes?
Yeah, right.
How do you get it started? You reduce taxes first. You bring business. It has to be done simultaneously, and that's leadership. You got to be looking at this, holistically, because you're not going to attract people unless you reduce crime. You're not going to attract families unless you have better education. You're not going to attract businesses unless other businesses are willing to come, seeing that it's okay and safe. So I had to immediately, upon becoming mayor, I said, we got to change the image and perception of the city of Aurora and start beating our own drum and talking about the resources we have. We got to do the same thing for the state of Illinois. In Aurora, we've got the longest riverfront in any city in any city throughout Illinois in our city. It's called the Fox River. We have waterfront property in our city, but we weren't capitalizing on it. We had to tell people we've got waterfront property, come build on it. Now we've got two developers that are building on the east and west bank, one a $50 million project, another a $70 million project. But again, that didn't happen just by sitting there waiting for it to come. I had to go out and find these people. So at the same time, I'm looking for, restaurants and other hospitality and everything in the hospitality industry to tell them, guess what? We just signed a contract with some restaurateurs that they're going to be another 3,000 people living in our downtown within the next 4 years. We're going to need nice restaurants to eat at, and say, why don't you start building now? Because we're going to start building that apartment complex. We'll build them at the same time. So all the things happen together. Now, at the same time, when we're attracting these businesses, we're looking to reduce taxes because we're attracting other residents to move in the single family homes that are around our downtown. It's creating a synergy and excitement, and just kind of pulling people in and making them feel part of it. I mean, you guys did that podcast on Aurora. You've seen what we did, so you know it's possible if you have the right leadership and the right vision and ideas to make it happen. So to answer your question, what comes first? You got to do it all at the same time. It's simultaneous work.
So that is so exciting. And again, I'm pumped up again. You're very energetic. I love that. I love being in the room with energetic people. But you were able to do an Aurora over a span of time. And you use the word leadership, and that's key, right? You had to make sure if no one follows you, right, you're not a leader, right? So on a statewide level, what you've done in Aurora, how are you going to be able to do that? Because obviously, state, just sitting in Chicago is a behemoth. Like, how do you take that and grow with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you got to create, an environment where it's conducive for us to be successful. But think about a state. What is a state? It's a whole lot of cities and municipalities, just like the city of Aurora. That's all. A bunch. Matter of fact, 1,200 of them, just like the city of Aurora. Some small, some Chicago and Aurora, everything in between. Some with 10,000 residents, some with 3 million residents. But the fact is, at the leader at the top, you have to create an environment in our state. You got to bring pride back to it. We brought pride back to Aurora. We got to bring pride back to the state of Illinois. We don't have that. We're the land of Lincoln, and we're not beating our drum and saying the resources that we have in Illinois, the beautiful parks that we have in our southern forests of Illinois, the coal deposits that are money, the oil deposits we could be energy independent in our state as we see gas prices go up past $5, closing on $6 probably in the next couple of months. We've got to capitalize on that and recognize who we are and what we have to offer. And then talk about Chicago being in Illinois, one of the best cities in the world. But the only way that's going to happen is if we reduce crime and make people feel safe to go to Chicago, to Rockford, to Peoria, to Aurora. We got to reduce crime. We got to provide great education so families want to move to Illinois, so they know wherever they live in Illinois, their kids are going to be able to get a good education. So we got to support that through the Illinois State Board of Education. We got to make sure that these businesses that come while we're educating our young people are going to have employees to work their jobs in the future. So we got to do workforce development, which I have, the plan for Illinois has to be a 3-track plan. Right now, all education pretty much is preparing you to go to college. We all know not every kid's going to go to college, so what are they going to do if they don't go to college? Well, we don't plan for that in our education here in Illinois. We got to go back to what we talked about when I was a kid. We had woods class, we had metals class, we had welding class. We've got to do a 3-track. We got to do 1, the kids are going to go to college. 2, the kids are going to get into manual labor, some type of labor job, which these days you can make $150,000 working at a labor union or, a merit, work doing building and economic development. And then IT, which you don't necessarily go to college, you get a certificate. So if we start that 3-track program and we tell these businesses, when you come, we're going to have workforce development. We're going to have young people ready to work at the jobs that you bring to the state. That's how it happens. So you reduce crime. You bring, a safety. You reduce taxes, and you do everything you need to do. And businesses will come. People will come, because right now they're leaving. We lost 120,000 people just last year alone. Businesses are closing up shop. We lost Boeing. That's leaving Chicago, and there's going to be so many following suit. So we've got to turn that image around and get people excited and proud and get pride back in Illinois.
I think every one of our listeners here can empathize with that. I know everyone's looking for someone in the trades, going back to your 3-prong program, and we can't find them. There are not enough good tradesmen out here, and there's money to be made, and we don't push enough people down that path. Every one of our listeners is sitting here nodding their head going, yes, I cannot find a certified plumber for the life of me. It's crazy. Exactly. It's crazy that we put everyone into one path to move forward.
Exactly right. I was talking to the operating engineers union, local 150, who endorsed me for governor. And they said, we can't get anybody to drive, many of our cranes. These folks that drive these cranes make $150,000 a year, $150,000 now.
And pension.
What's that?
And a pension.
And a pension.
Yes.
So think about it. We're not telling our young people this in school. Now, not every kid's good with, math and science. Some kids are good with their hands, some kids with their eyes, some are artists. So we've got to identify with those things and put them on one of those 3 tracks and let a kid decide, what do you want to do? Now me, I was lucky enough, even though I grew up in low income housing with a single teenage mother raising me, I was lucky enough to go to the military and get the GI Bill to go to college. I took that track. But guess what? I still got school loans, from law school and whatnot, and those kids that maybe go through, labor, and do that, and drive that crane, they're not going to have that same college debt as I do. Those kids that go, and get an IT certificate and work in the field of IT, they're not going to have that same college debt that I do. So there's so many options for our young people, and we're not setting them on the right track here in Illinois.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Richard, you mentioned crime a couple different times and talking about some of the companies that are potentially leaving Illinois and the city of Chicago. Crime is a huge issue. We've talked about it a lot in this podcast. What is the immediate step there, right? Like, do you have in the first 90 days, 180 days, whatever that is, it's a big problem. What are the first baby steps to getting that under control?
All right. So the first thing we got to do is repeal this law that J.B. Pritzker just put into effect. He calls it the Safety Act. But really, it's very unsafe for our state, and it's going to spiral into make the state spiral into lawlessness. It's I Hate the Police Act, what I believe it is. So this act says it really gives more credibility to criminals than it does to the victims and the police that keep us safe and do their job every day to, keep our whole community safe. There's a no bond arrest. So you get arrested, you don't have to post bond at all. No cash bail. And this goes into effect January 1st. So the criminal, a felon, breaks the law, goes in, slaps high fives to the police officer, and leaves right away. No holding him in jail, no consequences whatsoever. Then maybe he has to come back to court later. They give him 2 or 3 chances to even show up to court. And that same individual that just got arrested can go, based on this new law, make a complaint against the police officer that just arrested him, and it's anonymous. And this complaint stays in this police officer's jacket for the rest of his career. Now, who's going to want to be the police? No one. And in January 1st, when this no cash bail goes into effect, all the people that are in jail now, 10,000 people throughout the state of Illinois, are just going to be purged out of jail just one day, back in the community. So we're going to spiral into lawlessness. And J.B. Pritzker signed this. So he says, I'm looking out for the criminal, the folks that are marginalized. But what about the rest of us? What about the people in the communities where those marginalized folks, criminals, are going to move back to? Many of them minority communities. Crime is going to spin even more out of control than it is now. 3 police officers were just shot just this last week. 10 police officers killed in the last year. Unheard of. So the first thing we do is recall that dangerous act that's going to, make Illinois spiral out of control. The next thing we do is we implement what we did in Aurora with what I call the 3 C's. Children, cops, community. Those are the 3 C's. Let me explain what these 3 C's are. The children, most people that commit crime are young people. So we recognizing that we got to engage our young people off the bat, right out of grade school, junior high school. Make sure they're in good programs, sports programs, after school programs. Make sure they're off the streets and in school itself. And we got to engage them to make sure they're not out breaking the law and creating mischief in the street. I'll give you an example of what we did in Aurora. Aurora was one of the most violent cities per capita in the state of Illinois. Now Wallet Hub says we're the 6th safest large city in America. So we created something for the kids to do. We have a large Latino population, and we had a number of Latino gangs, the Kings, Deuces, all these gangs in the state of Aurora. And talking to these kids, they said it was like being in a family. We owed something to the family. So we created a different family. We created a junior ROTC. Now we have the largest junior ROTC unit in the nation right here in the city of Aurora. So those kids that used to join the gangs and do violent things and break the law now are marching around in uniform in junior ROTC. Same kids, marching around in ROTC. And that's just one example of the things that we created for young people to do to keep them off street and keep them engaged. So the first C is children. Second C is cops. When I say cops, I'm talking about community-oriented police officers. We got to return to the beat cop. We got to have the cop not riding around in the black and white, it's a paramilitary force waiting for something to happen, but in a neighborhood, getting to know the neighbors, getting to know the people, being proactive instead of reactive. And once they do that, the neighbor feels comfortable with them, and it becomes more like a relationship building, so the neighbor can then say, Mr. Police Officer, this is what's going on over there with little Johnny. Talk to him before he gets any more trouble. Or this is what we're hearing in the streets about, something that's going to go on that we need to stop. So the police officer infiltrates and becomes proactive and stopping crime before it even starts. So the second C is cops. Third C is community. I don't care how many people you arrest out of a neighborhood. If you don't empower the community to have an interest and a stake in their own community, even if it's a low income, if you don't empower them to take their community back and hold on to it, it's always going to revert back to lawlessness and crime. You got to have block groups that walk around making sure that, everything's okay in the neighborhood. You got to have people planting flowers, on street corners, just making sure that the neighborhood is beautified. You got to have people taking pride and stock in their community. And if you do those 3 C's, children, cops, community, and then you add economic development with jobs and opportunity, prosperity, just like that. I've seen it happen in Aurora. If we can do it in Aurora, we can do it anywhere.
Richard, that's all awesome stuff. How not everyone shares the same ideology, though. Like, how do you get the total buy-in, right? Because it's not a dictatorship. You can't just come in and say, we're doing X, Y, Z. How do you get the other side to buy in and actually move forward?
And that's leadership. My job is to excite people. My job is to get people recognizing that we can overcome our obstacles. My job is to, convince people that there is another way, that we as a community, we can rise up. As a state, we can rise up and we can work together to do something better. My grandfather always told me when I was a young man, he was my father figure because my father wasn't in my life. He always said, be better than your circumstances. Be better than your circumstances. So my job is to relate to people and let people know and express to people, we can be better than our circumstances. And let me show you how. Follow me, and it's about leadership.
So you mentioned, Chicago is a majority of this state, and our listeners, most of them are investors in Chicago. And you mentioned Boeing. What type of influence do you have to have on a national level, or what do you feel your challenge might be to be able to bring companies like Boeing back in here or retain the ones that are here in order to really keep Chicago growing?
We didn't have to lose Boeing. We didn't. But, when we have an environment where crime is out of control, where kids are getting killed in Millennium Park, one of the most popular tourist attractions in the world, a kid got shot right in front of the bean, the same bean that I've looked at, and I'm sure you guys have looked at and seen your reflection in it many times. A week before that, young man's walking down the street with his cell phone in his hand, and he gets mugged, and he won't give his cell phone in the code, and he gets shot 3 times, once in the face. Week before that, ladies on the north side, 71-year-old lady taking a early night stroll with another lady with a baby carriage, gets mowed down in drive-by shooting. When you have crime like that, and then you have taxes that are and then you have so much corruption that prevents the state from moving forward. Any any business, especially a business like Boeing, that says, look, we can do better somewhere else. I mean, we don't have the weather that other states have, that Californias and the Texas and the Floridas. People stay in the Midwest because they like what we have to offer. They like Chicago. They like Illinois. But if we don't provide an environment that makes them feel safe and makes them feel like they can grow, they're going to leave. They're going to say we can do better somewhere else. So to answer your question, what do? We create the environment that's conducive for growth. And we don't have that right now. And again, that's leadership. You got to create excitement. You got to create energy. You got to put pride back, and you got to make people want to feel like they want to be part of it, just like we did in the city of Aurora. Before I became mayor, let me just tell you, we've done more economic development in the first 4 years of my term as mayor than other mayors have done collectively in 40 years. I'll just say that. We filled all the old buildings that were empty the day I took office. They're either under construction or completed with restaurants, market rate apartments, workforce housing. We've got 45 square miles in the city of Aurora. And we break it up into quadrants. Every single quadrant has economic development going on. And how does that happen? Because you create excitement. It's like a domino. You push that first domino down and all of them come around after. If you create the excitement and you show it, and you bring a development like Bloomhaven, this 300,000 square feet Albatross, which now is 300,000 square feet of success, other businesses are going to see that and they're going to be like, I want to go to Aurora. What's going on there? We can do that same thing for Illinois. They say, I see what's going on in Chicago. I want to be a part of it. I see what's going on in Peoria or Rockford. I want to be a part of it. I see what's going on in East St. Louis. I want to be a part of it. We got to create that energy. We got to create that. It doesn't just happen. Mayors in the past and governors that just sit around waiting for something to happen. You can't do that. You got to go out and you got to grab the bull by the horns. You got to drag them to where you need them to get things done, period.
We manage Six Tower, a building that got rehabbed in your tenure, the ice cream shop on the ground floor. And that's one of the many right in that little corridor. First, from what I know from my facts, it was the first building in Aurora to have electric back in the day. So
exactly right. Charlie's Creamery.
Yep. So, but that's one to your under your watch that got redeveloped. That's an impressive building now.
Absolutely. And these buildings are 120-year-old buildings. When you're saying the first building with electricity, these are, and there are many of them sitting empty for 40, 50, one up to 70 years. And just in the first 4 years of my term, we've got these things up and running and created that excitement, that energy. If I could do that for the city of Aurora, I can do that for the whole entire state. Because again, all the state is just, our state is just 1,200 cities, just like Aurora. Some a whole lot smaller, but with the same issues and problems that we need to address head on.
So a ton of ambition, a ton of great vision here that you laid out. If we were to sum it up, though, let's say you become governor and you're looking back in your legacy, what is the one thing you want to be remembered for? Like if you became the governor of Illinois, what's the one, that legacy, that footprint of, hey, this guy came in and he did X?
I would say that if we could make this the true land of Lincoln again, if we could bring pride back to Illinois and make it so exciting that people are Illinois is in everyone's mouth throughout this country. And they talk about who we are and what we've done in this short period of time, then that would be something that I think would be pride worthy and something I'd hold dear, probably for the rest of my life, just bringing pride back and letting folks know that we are the land of Lincoln. We are the sixth largest state in the union. Used to be the fifth, but we keep losing population. We are a force to be reckoned with, recognize who we are and what we are to this country, and once we get that feeling that, we're back, then I think that we've risen up past our circumstances and we recognize we can be better than who we were, then that's something I'll hold on to that I think I'd be proud of.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Great way to wrap this. So
drop the mic on that one.
Yeah, drop it. So, Richard, we end every episode with a fact of either Chicago or Illinois, et cetera, that I asked Mark. So I'm going to ask it to him. You're going to know the answer to this, I believe. So if he doesn't get it right, we're going to have to turn to you as a lifeline here. All right. So no pressure. Bunch of votes are on the line, though. All right. So our guest today, we mentioned just the excellent resume at the front of this, but he's also a graduate of East Aurora High School, locally born and raised there. The mascot of East Aurora High School since the 1920s has been, and Mark, I'll give you multiple choice here.
Thanks.
Is it the Tomcats, the Bobcats, the Wildcats, or the Jaguars?
I was trying to look at Richard's face to see if is there any tell when you're rattling it off. I'm not seeing anything. I'll go with the Jaguars.
Richard, you want to help him out here?
Tomcats, brother.
Tomcats.
Hear us roar, brother.
Great question, Tom. That was an awesome question.
Cats on the loose.
Did you play any sports in high school there?
I was a wrestler.
All right.
Nice.
That's where the tenacity comes from. The tenacity and the confidence.
Exactly right.
All right, Richard, thank you very much. Tom, thanks as always. Listeners, we'll click to a whole bunch of resources here in the show notes. Richard, just want to thank you for coming on here today. It was awesome. Hopefully we'll have you back on someday as governor and we can celebrate in a different way. Tom, listeners, we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thanks all.
Thanks for having me on. Bye now.